In at 5, fan death. This is quite a bizarre one that I'm honestly surprised I never heard of before. Supposedly in Korea there is a genuine fear of fan death. Now fan death is a well-known belief in Korean culture where it is thought that if you have an electric fan running in a closed room with an unopened window, you will quite literally die. Now of course there is no definitive evidence to support this strange claim, yet it's still widely believed. Where this legend came from is unclear, but fears of electric fans date back to their introduction to Korea, with stories existing in the 20s and 30s, warning the risks of nausea, asphyxiation and facial paralysis to electric fans. Yeah, this is not a joke. Now you're probably asking yourself what the proposed cause of death actually are. Right, well first up is hypothermia, heat stress. Now, air movement will increase sweat evaporation, which cools the body, but in extreme heat, when the blown air is warmer than the body's temperature, it will increase the heat stress placed on the body, and in turn causing heat exhaustion. Now the EPA, aka the Environmental Protection Agency, discourages people from using fans in closed rooms without ventilation. However, they do approve of a fan if a window is open. Very strict fan rules here, guys. Now the second proposed cause of death is asphyxiation. It is alleged that fans may cause asphyxiation by oxygen displacement and carbon dioxide intoxication. Honestly, I've spent my whole life using fans and I'm still here. I think, anyway. I don't know. In at 4, red surgical mask. As most know, plastic surgery is quite a big deal in Korean culture, as it is in America and the rest of the world, with the pursuit of perfection a thing that most strive towards. So this legend goes, I quote, "A man is sitting in an empty subway car when a tall, thin woman walks in and sits in front of him. Her hair is dark and long, it covers most of her face, but he can see that she has a red surgical mask on. Thinking nothing of it, he leans back and watches the door close. The man notices her eyes and she catches him staring. He smiles at her. She asks the man, 'Am I pretty?' Taken aback, the man stammers, 'Yes.' She takes her mask off, revealing the rest of her face. There was a gash from ear to ear, her gums, teeth and ligaments showing. She screams at the man, 'Am I pretty now?' In terror, the man tries to get her as far away from the woman as possible. She takes out a scalpel and makes her way to him when the doors open and the man runs out. Now, this legend may sound familiar to a lot of you, and that's because it shares very similar roots to Slit-Mouthed Woman, a malevolent figure from Japanese folklore who partially covers her face with a mask or object and carries some sort of sharp instrument. According to popular legend, she asks potential victims if they find her attractive. If they respond no, she will kill them with her weapon. However, if they say yes, she will reveal that the corners of her mouth are slit from ear to ear. Now it's uncertain where the legend originated from, whether it was Japan or Korea, but regardless, it's straight up terrifying. Coming in at 3, Soul-Stealing Dreams. Now this one is truly terrifying because not only does it involve your dreams, but also your dead family members. It's The legend goes that dreaming of a dead loved one is a bad omen, especially near water. It is said that the dead family member will call you towards them, and if you embrace them in your dream, they will steal your soul away. Lovely. One particular story occurred on a Korean TV show where they would discuss hauntings and encounters with the paranormal. I quote, "During one of the episodes they had a family on where they talk about how their grandmother had passed away. The man said that he dreamt that his grandmother was beckoning him over while she was waist deep in water. For some reason he didn't go and he told his wife. His wife explained that going into the arms of a dead person, in water no less, was a sure sign that your soul was going to be stolen. The husband said he kept having the same dream, and every time he was closer and closer to the grandmother until one day the family realized that they had kept something of hers. They paid respects to her once more and the dream stopped." Lesson number 1. If you're from Korea, do not hang on to any of your deceased family members' belongings. They will literally steal your soul for it. Coming in at 2, the virgin ghost. Stories of virginal ghosts are everywhere in Korea. They're often found in abandoned buildings, but more typically they're found in hospitals, schools, bathrooms, cemeteries and wooded areas. Just don't go to these places and you're cool, I guess. Now these virgin ghosts almost always have long hair covering their faces and dressed in white garbs. This is due to the fact that tradition stated that single women should always wear their hair up, and the white garb is usually worn during death. In Confucian Korean tradition, it was a woman's role to serve her father, husband, and sons. If she died before being able to fulfill this goal, she would be cursed to walk the earth for eternity. Now, legend goes that when you're in the presence of a virgin ghost, you will know it. This is because you will feel a sudden change in temperature, perhaps a sudden chill, and the wind will often change direction. One story goes that, I quote, "A man was living on the topmost floor of the apartment building. One late night, he heard someone knocking on his door. He did not find anyone at the door, but he heard a voice telling him to count to 100 with his eyes closed and without making any noise. He started counting but got curious at 49. He opened his eyes and found a virgin ghost staring at him. It is said that virgin ghosts are most likely to be found in abandoned buildings. They are dressed in white and have long hair." Very spooky indeed. And finally, in at number 1, the haunted bathroom. Now, for some very strange reason, Koreans have a lot, and I mean a lot, of stories about haunted schools, particularly haunted school bathrooms. Yeah, it's unsettling. But to be fair, Korean schools are definitely eerie. What with their dark stairwells and long hallways, they seem to be never ending. And of course, the creepy, oftentimes half-lit fluorescent lights. Enter Korean school bathrooms, which in pop culture are often depicted as decrepit, old, crumbling, and always dark. Now, legend has it that one of these stalls in these bathrooms, particularly the stall located towards the back, is where a girl killed herself and supposedly now haunts it. Students whisper that the toilet flushes by itself and that the door will close with no wind around. Rumour has it that if you're alone in the bathroom, you can hear the crying. Some also state that you can often see her watching you from inside the mirror. Another legend from a similar vein talks of a ghost that emerges from the toilet and asks you if you will use red or blue toilet paper. Honestly, neither. We all use white, right? If you choose red, the ghost will cut you open. If you choose blue, the ghost will choke you to death. Coming in at 5, Arkansas, the Dog Boy. Now, the name may sound ridiculous, yes, but the story is truly chilling. If you find yourself at 65 Mulberry Street in the middle of a small Arkansas town of Quintman, you may very well encounter the hulking outline of a 300-pound, half-man, half-beast with glowing animal eyes. This is the Dog Boy. If you see him, walk quickly, as he is rumoured to chase people down the street, biting at their heels, just like a dog. Now, this legend is rare, because the story behind the story may just be even creepier than the legend itself. Gerald Bettis, the only son of the Bettis family of 65 Mulberry, was reportedly a problem child, but not a cute one. No, this kid collected and tortured animals before turning his sociopathic focus to his parents, supposedly imprisoning them in their home and murdering his father. Bettis was eventually imprisoned for growing marijuana on his back porch and would later die in a state penitentiary in 1988 of a drug overdose. Spooky stuff. Coming in at 4, Colorado, Riverdale Road. Riverdale Road near Thornton, Colorado is crammed with horrifying legends to bring even the bravest paranormal investigator to their knees. Riverdale Road is notorious for having some of the most chilling and endless ghost stories, beginning with the fact that it is literally referred to as the gates to hell. Yeah, now the gates themselves are simply made of rusty iron, yet people travel from far and wide to visit them. This is because the man who built the gates lost his mind once they were finished. He then burned his entire mansion with his family asleep inside. Worse still, he was never caught or put on trial. As of now, people report that a lady in white walks the road close by the gates, with many assuming she is the man's wife, wandering, searching for her murdered children or even her husband. Another ghostly story goes that there are accidents that specifically happen to joggers all the time. Once upon a time, a jogger decided to take a jog along Riverdale Road and ultimately got hit. They sadly passed away, and rumour has it their spirit now haunts the road. People who walk the road are said to have heard a loud heartbeat and footsteps. If you drive by, you might also feel something hitting your car when there's literally nothing there. Now, there are so many more stories, but we'll end with the Native American shapeshifters. Now, what makes Riverdale Road interesting isn't just the road itself, but because the area of land that it cuts through is also rumoured to be haunted. For hundreds of years, there have been countless stories about Native American shapeshifters roaming the land, with many passers-by spotting them on the road. According to reports, they take on different shapes and communicate with people in their own ways. They're also known to play tricks on anyone who walks down Riverdale Road, so be warned. Coming in at 3, New Jersey, The Watcher. Now, this legend could honestly be the script for a horror movie. Let me break it down for you. A family begin receiving ominous notes just days after they close on their dream home. Yeah, spooky, right? Well, this story took off back in 2015 after a young family moved into a $1 million house in Westfield, New Jersey. However, they began to get letters signed by someone only IDing themselves as the Watcher, who claimed it was their duty to watch over the house, while also spouting weird lines such as, I quote, "Do need to fill the house with the young blood I requested," and "Who has the bedrooms facing the street?" Yeah, creepy. The writer also noted the make of the couple's car and the comings and goings of construction crews. He also observed that the couple had 3 young children, stating, I quote, "Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." Now, no one quite knows the truth behind the legend, whether it was a prank or a spooky neighbor, but what we do know is that the Watcher was never caught and still remains watching the house in Westfield, New Jersey. Coming in at number 2, California, Turnbull Canyon. Turnbull Canyon is a 4-mile loop trail located near Whittier, California, and is part of Puente Hills Preserve. It lies in the northern central part of the preserve and is an east-west canyon with relatively steep drainage. Now, natives call Turnbull Canyon Hatunga, or the place of the devil, and is supposedly where the ghosts of those slain for not converting to Christianity dwell alongside witches and Satanists who reportedly used the place to sacrifice children, whose spirits now walk along the canyon. According to other reports, Turnbull Canyon also houses the ghosts of 21 children who perished in a plane crash back in 1952. However, there are no existing records of the incident, so this may be local legend. However, what we do know is real is that in the canyon lies the remains of an old insane asylum that supposedly came back to life to kill a teen in the 1960s via long dormant electrical wire. Not only that, but there are cults, alien encounters, and gravity hills. The list goes on and on. Basically, if something unnerves you, there is probably a story about it going down at Turnbull Canyon. Now, its origin is pretty simple. Turnbull's evil dates back centuries. However, it wasn't until the site was established as a fur trapping site in 1845 that things started to get a little odd, and very quickly word of the canyon's evil terrors spread far and wide, making it one of the world's most visited places, but not for its beauty, but due to morbid curiosity. And finally, coming in at number 1, Virginia, the Bunny Man Bridge. This terrifying urban legend originated from 2 incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but very quickly spread through the Washington, D.C. area as well. Now, like all legends, there are many variations. Most involve a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or a hatchet. Now, the legend goes that in 1904, a group of convicts were piled onto a bus to be transported from an asylum in Clifton, Virginia to a nearby prison. En route, however, one of the buses crashed and the convicts managed to escape. Thankfully though, the police were able to round up all of them, all but one. As their search went on, they began to find skinned, half-eaten bunnies in the woods and hanging from the overpass of Fairfax Bridge, now known as the Bunny Man Bridge. A year later, on Halloween night, several teens went to hang out under the bridge. Come morning, they were all found dead. Legend has it that if you hang out under the bridge on Halloween night, you will meet the same fate as the rabbits and the teenagers. Jump ahead to 1970, there were numerous police reports of people who had been threatened by a man holding an axe and wearing a white suit with bunny ears. Terrifying. A few other people also reported that the man in the suit threw an axe at them for trespassing near the bridge. To this day, there have been numerous reportings of the man with the axe, as well as the dead rabbits in the woods surrounding Fairfax Bridge, which is now known, once again, as the Bunny Man Bridge. Now, versions of the legend have varied over the years, particularly in the Bunny Man's name, motives, weapons, victims, and description, with some accounts stating that victims were mutilated and others that the Bunny Man is a ghost. However, that aside, the legend is absolutely horrifying and has prevented a lot of Virginia locals from wandering too close to the bridge.
Starting us off at number 5, we've got the Pied Piper. We all know the legend of the Pied Piper at this point. This legend slash fairy tale dates way back and has different regional variations. Some say that the flautist drew snakes away from a town, others say it was rats. In various versions of the stories, Mr. Pied Piper can be portrayed as generous, greedy, benevolent, or evil. It's all up to the storyteller. However, in Transylvania's version, he was a terrifying hypnotist. See, at some point, there was an abundance of rats in a small German town. The townsfolk didn't know what to do until the Pied Piper showed up. Using his bewitching tunes, he paraded the rats out of town, never to return. He came back to the village expecting to be lauded as a hero and paid a sum of money, and neither of these things happened. He did his very best to convince the townsfolk that his services were worth their weight in gold, but they never did pay him. This made him quite upset. Leaving the town, he came up with a horrible revenge scheme. The next week, he returned, musical instrument in hand. This time, the goal was not rats or other pests. No, he wanted to lure away the town's children. And so he did, playing a new, hypnotizing song that tugged at the hearts and minds of all the kids around. He once again paraded out of town, but this time with their future in tow. By the time all the adults realized what had happened, it was too late. What did the Pied Piper do with these children? Well, there are different theories. A particularly grim idea is that he led them all right off a cliff, like human lemmings. Yikes. Another less terrible one that'll link us to Transylvania is that he led them to a cave in the region and sealed it up. Eventually, the kids did escape and they settled in the Romanian countryside. Some say that's why you can find plenty of blonde-haired, blue-eyed German speakers in the area. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Liar's Bridge. Oh, you're all in trouble. I see you down in the comments posting first like 10 comments deep and claiming that you don't like my shirts. I know fraud when I see it. Nobody better try to cross that bridge unless you're down to die. Okay, I'll elaborate. There's a bridge in Sibiu that has quite the reputation. It's said that anyone who lies while crossing it will cause it to collapse. That is serious. This legend has become so popular that many brides-to-be are required to declare their love and purity while crossing it, and if they're being dishonest, well. Of course, there's no way that the bridge would still be standing if this were really the case, as people love to lie. However, some have a less dramatic tale to tell, that the bridge will make certain noises upon the delivery of a lie, which could have something to it. The origins of the lying bridge are up in the air, but there are a few different explanations. Some claim that lying or adulterous spouses and fiancés would be tossed off the bridge if their impropriety was discovered. This would definitely explain the modern practices associated with the bridge. Others say that merchants who cheated their customers would be met with the same fate: overcharge or sell something under false pretenses and take a dip. It could also originate with tales of cadets coming to town, wooing local lasses, promising them the world, and then disappearing forever. I would say that all these scenarios could result in a bridge famous for ending liars. Would you be willing to take a stroll across the footpath? Coming in at number 3, we've got Baobao. It really does seem that every culture has their own version of the boogeyman. I suppose parents got really fed up with their young children, eh? Something we can all relate to. Baobao is exactly that, a Romanian boogeyman. However, I find this figure to be even scarier than lots of the other children snatchers. See, the Baobao stays in the same home as the kids. This cloaked figure is believed to appear whenever children misbehave, and is always waiting for his chance from a hiding place somewhere in the house. Sometimes it's the broom closet, other times it's the storeroom. Either way, I bet this knowledge scared the daylights out of a bunch of Transylvanian kids. Imagine playing around and coming face to face with the door concealing a mysterious man who will take you away for acting up. With this knowledge, I bet kids were actually quite well behaved. Unlike boogeymen in other cultures, the kidnappings also only last for a little while. The Baobao will grab disobedient kids and hold on to them for a year. So you don't immediately get turned into soup or drowned in a river, but instead you have to live with this terrifying man for 365. Give or take. No friends, no family, no good food, just hard work and a scary supervisor. If anyone did get taken away, it probably scarred them for life. After the year, they get returned home, and I'm sure their lives are never the same. Coming in at number 2, we've got the ghosts of Talecki Mansion. Here we go, some real Transylvanian ghost stories. The region is known for its beautiful architecture and castles, so there's no surprise that all sorts of ghastly tales are attached to the ornate buildings. Unfortunately, Dracula's castle is Bram Stoker's invention and doesn't really exist. But there are plenty more spooky facades from where that came from. One such tale originates in the Talecki Mansion. This rundown and abandoned building was once an extravagant abode, but these days most locals do their best to avoid it. It's actually relatively close to the university town of Cluj-Napoca, in a smaller town called Okna Murs. Legend says this mansion is haunted by the drunken ghosts of soldiers. During the Second World War, a squad of soldiers broke into the mansion. They'd heard that there was plenty of good wine in the cellars and decided it would be a good night to imbibe. After locating the gigantic barrels, they had themselves a grand old time. As soldiers tend to do when given downtime with lots of alcohol, they got drunk. A little too drunk, probably. I say this because they ended up goofing around with their guns and firing them inside of the mansion. After causing a mess and a half, one unlucky marksman hit an unintended target. His bullet pierced one of the gigantic barrels, which started to flood the cellar. In all likelihood, a couple of barrels were probably punctured. Gallons and gallons of wine rushed into the underground room, drowning the soldiers before they could escape. I suppose that's as good a way to go as any, drowning in wine. Although I think the soldiers might have enjoyed it a little bit more if it was in their bellies rather than their lungs. And finally, at number 1, we've got people eating lakes. Sorry to all you Great Lakes swimmers out there, the Transylvanian bodies of water tend to be a little more aggressive than others. Of course, they don't actually eat people, but they drown enough experienced swimmers that folks started to claim that they had an appetite. One such lake is Lake Vendrell, which is known for devouring even the most skillful of swimmers. Remember folks, don't eat before going swimming, always have a buddy, and try to avoid voracious waterways. If the disappearances of swimmers wasn't enough, locals have also been known to find bloody chunks of people floating around. That doesn't usually happen when somebody drowns, right? Another lake famous for consuming is Lesser Lake. Apparently this oversized puddle once drowned an entire town. Something gave way, causing the lake to flood in and envelop everything. Neighboring towns thought the church was celebrating something based on all the noise the bells were making, but nope, the bells were ringing because the church was literally descending under the water. So yeah, you better watch your back around those Transylvanian lakes. They'll grab you before you can say backstroke. Does that change anyone's travel aspirations? Probably not. The spooky mysteries are a big draw for a lot of folks visiting Romania. Just don't go looking for Dracula's castle, eh? So what did you think of the list? Were you familiar with these legends beforehand? Which is your favorite? Are there any Romanians watching today? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Again, at number 5, we've got the two-striped Telemonia spider. We're gonna start this one off with an older tale. This one was actually quite popular back in the late 90s, the golden age of chain emails. It's likely that this urban legend was so effectively spread thanks to the relative inexperience of all online users, but it almost seems too silly to be real nowadays. Actually, wait. There are much less believable stories flying around the internet today. Never mind. Back to the actual urban legend though, there were many reports of the venomous two-striped Telemonia spider being found under public toilet seats. You know, as spiders do. Accounts were widespread, with stories popping up with various twists, making them seem like these spiders were biting and killing toilet users all over America. In fact, it got so popular that the Telemonia got a nickname, the butt spider. Seems legit. It gained notoriety through lots of chainmail and reposts, you know, the kind of stuff that your tech-illiterate great aunt would fall for. Don't forget to look, this is really scary in the subject line, etc., etc. One of the most famous chain emails detailed 3 bites in Chicago. The recipient suffered from fever, chills, vomiting, muscular collapse, paralysis, and eventually death. Sheesh, that is a scary spider, all from sitting on a toilet seat. The 3 women who fell victim to this terrible spider were seemingly unconnected until it was discovered that they had all recently visited the same restaurant. At first, people were blaming the food until a waitress came in to grab her check and used the washroom without eating. She also fell victim to these symptoms, which prompted investigators to check out said washroom. Lo and behold, they found a spider who liked cold, damp climates and had a deadly bite. The Arachneus gluteus. Seems silly now, but this spider was taken very seriously back then. This urban legend was actually started by a guy named Steve who wanted to prove how silly chainmail could be. He dropped in a bunch of hints like the name of the spider to ensure nobody would take it too seriously. But people still did, and they even put their own spin on the story, replacing ridiculous aspects with real ones. And as it circulated more folks became afraid of spiders and public washrooms. Way to go, Steve. You nailed it. Coming in at number 4, we have teens sewing their mouths shut. Parents will believe anything if they think it's harming their kids. Video games cause violence, classic books are bad influences, there are secret demonic messages in pop music. Now, those examples have been around for a while, even pre-internet. However, now that the internet is alive and well, there is a whole new category of bunk that people will believe has undue influence on their children. Viral Facebook posts with new moral panics attached each week. Stories about bullying, predators, dangerous apps, and more. It's enough to make your head spin. If someone can find an image of something seemingly dangerous and put a panicky caption below it, you better believe that all the Karens and Carols will share it like there's no tomorrow. The one we'll talk about today seems to imply that teens are going to undergo extreme body modification just for kicks. Folks were saying that teenagers had been sewing their mouths shut with needle and thread. I mean, I can see maybe giving yourself a piercing or a stick and poke tattoo, but why on earth would anybody sew their whole mouth shut for no reason? Posts were shared with an image of someone's lips apparently sealed via sewing kit, and folks were terrified that their kid would be the next to do it. Well, as it turns out, nobody was actually permanently closing their mouths. So what was actually going on? Apparently somebody had taken a screen grab from a YouTube makeup tutorial and convinced the world it was real. The actual image came from Promise Fan, who was doing a Halloween-themed video where she cut dark string to different lengths and glued the pieces above and below her lips. It's a pretty convincing illusion with some makeup used to color the spot where each piece ended to make it look bloody and bruised. However, if you watch the video, you'd know that just by opening her mouth, the pieces fall away. But try convincing a soccer mom frothing at the mouth, though. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Talking Angela app, unsafe for kids. I'm sure most people have heard some version of the story before, an app that spies on your kids and gets them to share personal information. Maybe it's run by hackers or pedophiles or both. This was a very popular tale when Talking Angela, a widely available app, was at the peak of its popularity. Kids could talk and interact with a Parisian cartoon cat with features like facial recognition, voice playback, and a text-based chatbot. Rumors about Talking Angela's safety had been circulating since release, with all sorts of folks claiming that it was a luring tool for pedophiles or a front for hackers to speak with children. This led to the urban legend getting a little bit out of hand, with Facebook moms posting all sorts of ridiculous stuff that even got picked up by news organizations. A lot of these posts read something like, "Attention, parents and grandparents, do not download this app. I just saw a post from another mom and it says that it takes pictures of your kids without you knowing, and it also knows where your kids are, and it asked my precious Caden what his name was and where he went to school. Oh, delete it right away or else." It's all very sensational, but hey, it's a new era of urban legends. Not all of this is totally unfounded though. Although it has been proven that Talking Angela is not run by hackers or pedophiles, it can engage in chat and ask questions, and it can share photos to social media. However, these features must be turned on by the user. I think the real lesson here is, don't leave little Talecki and Skylore alone with the iPad. They don't know any better. Coming in at number 2, we've got scary clown murders. Oh man, 2016 seems like it was so long ago at this point. I feel like I'm dredging up ancient memories that are actually only 4 years old. Who remembers the killer clown phenomenon, when creeps and freaks would wander around town in clown costumes carrying weapons? That was a wicked urban legend. Sure, plenty of folks were posting videos and pictures of the clowns meandering around, but most, if not all of these, were hoaxes. People had heard the rumors of it happening and decided to contribute to the legend in their own way. The first big story, though, was from the Global Sun, who reported that weapon-toting clowns had crossed the US border into Canada and killed 23 people. Yikes. People glommed onto this and it spread like wildfire. Unfortunately, not too many people read the whole article. If they clicked the link and made it to the bottom of the page, they would have realized that the Global Sun was a fake news site that doesn't publish factual stories. But by the time anyone had figured that out, it was too late. Clown fever had taken North America by storm. You couldn't log on to any social media without seeing some POV video of someone being menaced by a rubber-masked assailant in the middle of the night. It even got to the point where residents of Greenville, South Carolina reported that clowns were trying to lure kids into the woods. Like most urban legends, there was no real evidence to back any of this up. It just seemed like people's innate fear of clowns was being exploited. And finally, at number 1, we have Ebola zombies. Just like the more recent Corona zombies hoax, this story became legendary when somebody tried to capitalize on the fear and uncertainty surrounding a pandemic. After a Liberia-based newspaper published accounts of 2 Ebola victims coming back to life under mysterious circumstances, the internet exploded with theories and stories. Anything zombie-related seems to have a wicked grip on the minds of people everywhere, so this kind of story really sets the imagination alight. Remember the bath salt zombies and voodoo zombies? People just want a zombie apocalypse, I guess. So after the newspaper published a story about 2 women coming back to life, the locals started to panic. They thought that women were ghosts and shouldn't live among them. Eventually, it got enough traction to make it to an international news outlet, but all the reports were missing key details. There was no information on how or when the patients were declared dead, and there was nothing on what happened between their deaths and their resurrections. Seems a little fishy, right? Well, the rumors died down after a while, but reports of a third victim coming back to life resurrected the Ebola zombie narrative. Even though this third case appeared to be satire, the internet was once again ablaze with Ebola zombie chatter. Since then, there have been no additional reports on these so-called zombies and no corroborating resurrections. So if there were Ebola zombies, there weren't too many of them, and their animation was not contagious. How many of these 5 urban legends have you personally encountered? What's your favorite internet urban legend? Do you think there's any truth to these stories?
At 5, the Witch Girl of Pilot's Knob. Now this legend comes to us from Marion, Kentucky, where a young girl is said to be buried in a concrete grave. Back in 1916, a woman named Mary Louise Ford and her 5-year-old daughter Mary Ellen Ford were living in Pilot's Knob. The mother and daughter were accused of being witches, and instead of waiting for the trial, the frightened villagers dragged the mother and daughter out of the house and burned them alive at the stake. Classic witch business. They then buried the mother's body in a different location, and to avoid the young girl coming back from the dead and seeking revenge, the fearful villagers made sure to take precautions. They buried the daughter in Pilot's Knob in a steel reinforced coffin, and then after lowering it into the grave, they filled it with concrete. Following that, they put gravel on top and built a metal fence all around the gravesite. Yeah, they were pretty damn scared. According to legend, the young girl's ghost paces back and forth behind the fence, searching for her mother who was buried somewhere else. Yet she cannot escape the confines of the fence. Many locals have even reported seeing tiny child's footprints in the gravel over her grave, and some believe that if you visit the girl's grave alone and get too close, her hands will come up and grab a hold of you and drag you down into the concrete. Folks who have reported to see her go say that she wears a white dress that is scorched at the bottom and her long blonde hair smolders at the ends. In at 4, the Hanging Man of Allendale Train Tunnel. The Allendale Train Tunnel is located south of Cincinnati in the woods behind the Allendale Trailer Park in Ellesmere, Kentucky. Now, legend goes that some years ago, a man hung himself from a hook that is set above the tunnel entrance. The man's ghost is said to walk the tunnel or even appear hanging from the hook. Not only that, but there are also reports of disembodied voices as well as screams coming from inside the tunnel. Now, for those seeking to locate the tunnel, there has been some confusion simply because it's known as a train tunnel, yet no trains run through it. It's actually a tunnel for the stream that runs under the tracks. In order to reach it, you must enter the woods, travel down a hill and follow the stream to reach the tunnel, which is now heavily graffitied and littered. Although in urban legend, one element rings true. There is a hook above the entrance to the tunnel, the clear indicator that you're in the right place. Enjoy. In at 3, the Witch's Tree. On 6th Street and Park Ave in Louisville, Kentucky, you will find what can only be described as a natural monstrosity. A knotted tree, so misshapen and tortured that it could easily serve as a portal to hell. Now, even if the tree itself didn't catch your attention, the trinkets, baubles and bead necklaces hanging from the branches certainly would. They are items that have been placed by the Louisville locals to appease the vengeful witches. Now, the legend of the bizarre tree begins in the late 19th century, where it was supposedly the gathering place for a coven of witches, where they would perform their ceremonies. All was well until a city planning committee decided to remove the tree ahead of the annual May Day celebration. This, of course, displeased the witches greatly, so much so that they cast a curse. Exactly 11 months to the day after the tree was cut down, the city suffered a storm so severe it was assumed by locals that the witches had made good on their curse and summoned a storm demon. Now, during this horrendous storm, lightning struck the stump of the old witch's tree, and suddenly a new tree began to grow. However, it was not a healthy tree, but rather twisted and otherworldly. Now, whether these stories are true or not, the locals of Louisville believe this tree houses something dark and sinister, and to this day continue to adorn it with baubles and trinkets. In at 2, the Headless Woman of Iroquois Park. Iroquois Park is a 739-acre park in Louisville, Kentucky, designed by Frederick Law Cherokee and Shawnee Parks. It is a serene and picturesque park with an old-growth forest and viewpoint atop the hill. However, as you wander through the forest and the winding trails on a warm night, you may begin to hear the sound of a dog barking wildly. Following that, a thick fog will roll in, partially obstructing your vision. Then, you will smell the stench of smoke and fire begin to rise in the air. The fog will break, but just for a moment, and then you'll see a figure begin to approach. Now, accounts vary, but some state that a woman will appear dressed in early 1800 settlement clothes, and as she walks through the park, you can see her very clearly holding her head in her hands as blood drips from her severed neck. The legend has been passed down from generation to generation, with each new storyteller making it much more gruesome. For those looking for a thrill, it is said that the Headless woman is regularly seen close to the lookout point, with some suspecting that she is the ghost of a farmer's wife who settled with her husband in the area where the park is now located. The story goes that one night while her husband was downtown on business, an Indian tribe attempted to sneak up on the homestead and ransack it. The intruders grabbed the woman and beheaded her before promptly setting fire to the home. Now, whether you believe this is that very same woman is up to you, but regardless, there have been far too many accounts of parkgoers seeing the Headless woman for it to be simply legend. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Pope Lick Monster. The Pope Lick Monster is said to be a part man, part goat, and part sheep creature reported to live beneath a railroad trestle bridge over Pope Lick Creek in the Fisherville neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, numerous urban legends exist about the creature and its origins, with some accounts claiming that the creature uses hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure trespassers onto the trestle in order to kill them. However, other accounts claim that the creature jumps down from the trestle onto the roofs of cars passing beneath it. No matter what the story, the creature is so unsettling to those who see it that they are driven to leap off of the trestle. Its origins vary, but some reports state that the human-goat hybrid was a circus freak who vowed revenge after being mistreated. In another version, the monster escaped from a train that was derailed on the trestle. And the final rumor is that the creature is really the twisted reincarnated form of a farmer who sacrificed goats in exchange for satanic powers. No matter which way you spin it, this creature is horrifying and is said to be behind a number of deaths and accidents at the trestle since its initial construction, despite the now looming 8-foot fence built to keep thrill seekers out.
Coming in at 5, rats in the toilet. Urban legends about animals in sewers have been rife throughout history, with the most notable being the alligators and crocodiles in the sewers of New York, which for the most part actually turned out to be true. However, the thought of finding something in your toilet inches away from vulnerable areas of your body, well, that's something nobody wants to think about. While the alligators and crocodiles are far reach, this legend seems to have some elements of truth. A toilet drain is just wide enough for a rat to climb up, first and foremost, with the animals being attracted to sewage lines due to undigested food and feces. They follow the pipes and boom, wind up in your toilet bowl. Back in 1999, a woman in Virginia got a nasty fright when she went to the toilet and found a rat there waiting for her. Honestly, I've never feared a toilet before, but I certainly do now. Apparently this has happened enough times for public officials to put out a warning. If you encounter a rat in your toilet, close the lid and flush. Godspeed. Coming in at number 4, the Bunny Man. The Bunny Man is an urban legend that originated in Fairfax County, Virginia back in 1970. The legend has many variations, but for the most part involves a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or hatchet. Most of the stories occur around Colchester Overpass, a southern railway overpass spanning Colchester Road near Clifton, Virginia, sometimes referred to as Bunny Man Bridge. In the tale, an escaped mental patient takes to gutting bunnies and hanging them from the bridge, but later escalated to the madman hanging teens in a similar manner. However, the legend is based out of reality. Following extensive research into the Bunny Man, the legend was linked to 2 cases of a man in rabbit costumes threatening people with an axe, with the vandalism reports occurring 10 days apart in 1970 in Burke, Virginia. The first incident occurred on the night of October 19, 1970 by US Air Force Academy cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée, who were visiting relatives in Burke. While returning from a football game that evening, they reportedly parked their car in a field to visit an uncle who lived across the street. As they sat in the car, they noticed something moving outside the rear window. Moments later, the front passenger window smashed and there stood a figure in a bunny costume. As they drove away, the couple discovered a hatchet on the car floor. The second reported sighting occurred on the night of October 29, 1970, when construction security guard Paul Phillips approached a man standing on a porch of a home on Guinea Road. The man was wearing a white bunny costume and appeared to be around 20 years old. According to Paul, the man stated, I quote, "You are trespassing. If you come any closer, I'll chop off your head." Now, while neither incidents resulted in death or disembowelment, the thought of an adult in a bunny costume wielding a hatchet is absolutely terrifying. Coming in at number 3, we have Polybius. Polybius is an urban legend that emerged back in the early 2000s, with it concerning a supposedly fictitious arcade game called Polybius. The legend describes the game as part of a government-run crowdsourced psychology experiment which was based in Portland during 1981. According to the legend, the game apparently produced intense psychoactive and addictive effects in players, with the machines being said to have been periodically visited by men in black for the purpose of data mining the machines and analysing the effects. Now, while the entire legend doesn't quite hold up, there are some pieces that are actually based in fact. Brian Dunning, host of the Skeptoid podcast, did some digging and discovered that a 12-year-old named Brian Mara had become sickened during a 28-hour marathon video game contest in Portland back in 1981. Just a few short days later, the Portland arcades were raided by federal agents who seized cabinets that were being used for gambling. Add these two events and add some fictitious elements and you have the legend of Polybius. Coming in at number 2, we have Candyman. The Candyman is an urban legend that tells the story of a murdered slave who returns from the dead in search of revenge if you say his name 5 times. In 1992, a Candyman movie was released based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker. This in turn sparked 2 sequels, as well as a slew of paranormal games that friends dare each other to play. According to the urban legend, if you look into a mirror and chant the name Candyman 5 times, he will appear behind you and kill you with his hook. Now, although this is a legend and you will likely not invoke him by saying his name, there is some reality to the story. In the Candyman movie, after saying his name 5 times, Candyman breaks through the medicine cabinet in a bathroom in order to kill his victim. This part is factual, believe it or not. Back in 1987, the Chicago Reader published a story about Ruth McCoy, a woman living in a Chicago housing project who called 911 insisting she was being attacked. When responders arrived, they found her shot body, with investigators determining that her assailants had gained access to her unit by climbing through her medicine cabinet, which adjoins the apartments. The complex was supposedly built that way so that plumbers could attend to leaks by simply removing the cabinet to reach the pipes. However, this in turn resulted in people using this method to burgle and murder. Absolutely terrifying. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Cropsey. Once upon a time, Cropsey was a mere urban legend, the boogeyman of Staten Island in New York City. Cropsey was rumored to be a homicidal madman who had escaped from a mental institution and had a hook for a hand, who supposedly hunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel system under an abandoned hospital. Parents would often use Cropsey as a way to frighten their children into being good and staying close to home. The urban legend became so popular it inspired a 1981 slasher movie called The Burning, which very quickly became a cult classic. However, what was thought to be fiction quite quickly became reality. In the 1980s, Cropsey came to life in the form of a deranged killer who really did kidnap children. He was called Andre Rand. Rand was a janitor at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island, which would eventually be closed in 1987 due to corporate punishment and rampant sexual abuse. In 1981, Holly Ann Hughes did not return home after going to the store to buy soap. Rand supposedly pulled up, pulling Holly into his car and driving away. Then again in 1983, 11-year-old Thais Jackson was reported missing after her mother had sent her to purchase food. She never returned. She was last seen exiting the Mariners Harbor Motel in Staten Island days after Rand had been released from prison. Then in 1987, Jennifer Schweiger was reported missing, and her body was later found underground after a 35-day search. Rand was ultimately convicted of the crime. A documentary about the madman was made entitled Cropsey, in which they speculate that Rand may have been involved with Satanism and provided the children to be sacrificed. Ultimately, Rand was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2037, at which time he'll be 93 years old. Coming in at 5, Arlington's Screaming Bridge. Now, this Texas legend will quite honestly make your hair stand on end. Legend has it that one full night more than 50 years ago, several teens were carpooling home after their high school
football game. Still riled up over the victory, driving responsibly definitely wasn't of utmost importance to the young teens. The bridge running through Arlington's River Legacy Park was just wide enough for one car at a time. You can probably guess where this is going. The teens hooting and hollering drowned out all the noise, like that of a vehicle that had no working headlights. The cars collided head-on before erupting in a fiery explosion and plunging into the waters below. Nobody survived. The bridge is now closed to vehicular traffic, with the site only accessed on foot. However, it now has a new name gifted to it by locals, Screaming Bridge, a name which was coined after the first brave souls went exploring along the bridge and experienced events that can only be explained by the supernatural. Legend has it, if you stand on the bridge and gaze into the river below, you'll see a tombstone for each of the deceased with their names, date of birth and death. Visit at midnight on the anniversary and you'll hear two cars screeching towards each other before colliding. Coming in at 4, the nurse at Bexar County Hospital. If you ever find yourself in Texas, whatever you do not find yourself at the dilapidated Bexar County Hospital, because it is supposedly housing the spirit based on an American serial killer called Janine Jones. Now, the real-life killer is responsible for the deaths of up to 60 infants and children in her care as a licensed vocational nurse during the 1970s and 1980s. In 1994, she was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 99 years in prison with triple credit. Now, the legend of the nurse at Bexar County Hospital is similar treading, with legend stating that a murderous spirit used to wander the halls killing patients in order of their room number, first 201, then 202, 203, 204. It began in one ward where patients all began asking about one particular nurse. However, when the staff checked the security camera, they found the patients speaking to seemingly no one. They saw the curtains close on their own, tracheotomy tubes get pulled out by an unseen force, but then, very quickly, the patients began dying in their room number order. Like I said, many Bexar County locals believe the legend to be based off of Janine Jones, but what do you guys think? Coming in at 3, Summit Elementary School. In Amarillo, Texas, there's a haunting legend surrounding a closed and abandoned school that everyone avoids. The Summit Elementary School is one of the most haunted locations in all of Texas, and its dark history makes it a hub for ghosts and spirits alike. The school was open up until 1972 and is haunted for numerous reasons, including a janitor who killed students and stuck them in the boiler, racially motivated murders that took place in the school, and murdered prostitutes hidden in the walls. These are just a few of the legends surrounding the terrifying building. Worse still, legend has it that if you're brave enough to visit the abandoned school at night, your car may do strange things. Swings will move by themselves and you might even hear voices coming from the walls. Honestly, this school is beginning to sound like the one from Marianne, which is a French horror series you all need to watch immediately. Do it. The Queen demands it. At 5, The Collector. The Collector is a really catch-all legend for creepy hermetic neighbours that might be doing something strange in their basements. However, the most common legend is that of the neighbour who collects human body parts and proudly displays them in mason jars around their home. However, this legend has some real-world roots, unlike the rest of our list. Back in 2011, Russian police arrested a man described by the media as a cemetery collector for digging up 29 corpses and dressing the remains in female clothing to display around his home. This is an absolutely horrifying legend that became even more sickening after this event came to large. You may never know who your neighbour is or what they're doing after hours. Just don't go to their basement if they invite you inside. In at 4, The Black Bird of Chernobyl. Now, this legend garnered traction on the internet, of course, and focuses on a creature that is allegedly seen in Ukraine around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, specifically in the weeks leading up to the disaster on April 26, 1986. Now, its description is very similar to that of the Mothman and is humanoid in appearance and was presumed to have been black or dark grey in colour. It was also claimed by witnesses that it possessed wings and glowing red eyes. The black bird was spotted by several workers before they passed away, with some theorising that the bird was serving as an omen of doom, warning the workers of the lethal radiation within the plant. Not only that, some of the survivors shortly before the nuclear meltdown began to experience weird weird goings on, including nightmares, threatening phone calls, and encounters with the winged beast. Following the disaster, and as the Soviet helicopters arrived, circling the smoldering plant, dropping clay, sand, lead, and other extinguishing chemicals on top of the flame, some of the workers claimed to have witnessed a 20-foot bird gliding through the undulating tentacles of irradiated smoke, which was spewing from the reactor. Frightening. In at 3, the curse of the Ivan Vasily. Ivan Vasily is perhaps one of the most terrifying and shocking urban legends that is actually true and exists in the Russian history books. Now, the ship was built in 1897 as a transport freight across the Baltic Sea to the Gulf of Finland and driven by a single triple expansion steam engine. This ship was reliable, stable, and nothing unusual happened for the first 5 years it was on the sea. Then, one night changed everything. In 1903, the Russian government was preparing for war with Japan. So the freighter's role changed drastically overnight and the ship was ordered to carry cargo of war materials to Russian warships. The ship was first sent to the west coast of Africa to get coal, and after they stocked up, the crew noticed a change on the ship. Something wasn't quite right. However, they continued and set sail across the Indian Ocean. Now, the uneasiness that the crew was feeling was as if there was an invisible entity on the ship, as if someone was watching them, and the atmosphere just felt wrong or negative. The crew were visibly scared. Then one night a man on the ship saw an apparition, a ghostly figure that was glowing with an odd mist, walking across the deck before disappearing behind a lifeboat. Of course, the sightings only made things worse for the crew, who were now on high alert. Just a few nights later, another crew member let out a terrifying scream, sending everyone into a panic. Then men went crazy and began to fight each other until one of them jumped into the ocean to his death. The crew had absolutely no idea what they were doing. A couple nights later, the crew just out of nowhere started to fight yet again, and another man jumped overboard to his death. The crew felt like they were being possessed by an unseen force. Once the ship finally docked, most of the crew abandoned the ship, and new crew were hired to handle the cargo. While out on the seas, the same thing began to happen, resulting in 2 people dying on the journey, including the captain, who flung himself overboard. This went on for some time until the crew finally realized the only way to deal with it was to burn the ship down. The sailors gathered in tugboats and watched on as the ship went down in flames. Coming in at number 2, the Well to Hell. The Well to Hell is a legend about a putative borehole in Russia which was reportedly drilled so deep that it broke through to hell itself. The legend holds that a team of Russian engineers in an unnamed place in Siberia had drilled a hole that was 14.4 kilometers deep before breaking through to a cavity. The researchers were of course intrigued by the discovery and lowered an extremely heat-tolerant microphone into the well. The temperature was reportedly 1832 Fahrenheit, and the chamber was filled with flames. Screams began to be picked up on the microphone, tormented screams that were begging for help. However, the recording was later found to be looped together from various sound effects. Now, in reality, the Soviet Union had drilled a hole more than 12 kilometers deep in the Kola super deep borehole, located not in Siberia but on the Kola Peninsula. Upon reaching the depths of 12,262 meters in 1989, interesting geological anomalies were found, but nothing supernatural and definitely not the Well to Hell. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Russian sleep experiment. This is perhaps one of the greatest urban legends of not just Russia but of all time. It's simply known as the Russian sleep experiment, and according to the legend, researchers in the 1940s took 5 prison inmates and locked them in an airtight chamber with a special gas to keep them awake. This was so they could see the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation and promised the subjects their freedom if they could go 30 days without sleep. The results were of course absolutely horrific. On the 5th day, paranoia began to set in and the prisoners stopped talking to each other. On the 9th day, a few of them began screaming relentlessly, while others tore apart the books they were given, smeared them with feces, and blocked off the one-way mirror so they couldn't be seen. Then, out of nowhere, the screaming stopped. 3 days went by without sound from inside the chamber. The researchers tried to address them via the intercom, stating that they were coming in and for the prisoners to lie flat on the floor. Then one of the voices answered, "We no longer want to be freed." After 15 days, the researchers finally opened the door, and the sight was apparently horrific. One of the prisoners was dead and completely torn to shreds, with chunks of him stuffed into the floor drain. The other 4 prisoners had mutilated themselves to the brink of death and were terrified at the thought of going to sleep and begged to stay inside the chamber. They were forcibly removed, and when surgeons tried to fix the damage they had inflicted on themselves, they resisted so strongly that they couldn't be sedated. They laughed as they were sewn back together, fully awake and aware. Eventually, after enough demanding, they were returned back to the chamber, after the head researcher told his team to lock them back in. However, one member of the team resisted, shot the head researcher, and then shot one of the 2 remaining prisoners. Before killing the last prisoner, he asked just one thing: "What are you?" The prisoner responded, "Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." After this, the researcher shot the prisoner in the heart. Coming in at number 5, Baranov Castle. Now I should begin by saying that Alaska doesn't have any actual castles, however it used to. It was the Baranov Castle and was home to many Russian governors in the 1800s. As of today, what remains is the hill the castle stood upon, and the gorgeous hill that spirits now reside on. Now the castle has a history spanning far longer than Alaska has been a part of the USA, which I guess isn't that long to be fair. Even before the castle was abandoned, tales of a mysterious ghost of a lady in dark clothing had become a local legend. It was supposed that she was a Russian aristocrat who had committed suicide on her wedding night after marrying a man she did not love. Now she walks Castle Hill and sometimes the Russian bishop's house nearby. She is also said to be draped in diamonds and a long black veil. She is said to be out most often at the midnight hour, aren't they all? And you may catch a glimpse of her bemoaning her fate. The area is known as Castle Hill in Sitka, and the site remains a popular tourist attraction. However, that is mostly due to the supernatural elements surrounding the mound. Would you dare step foot on Castle Hill? I dare you. In at number 4, Christmas Town. There's quite literally a city in Alaska called North Pole, where it is Christmas all year round. Which is a dream come true, I want to live there. However, this quaint Christmas town has a notorious reputation. In 2006, the snowy little suburb of Fairbanks was hit with a horrific incident when a group of 6 middle school students were arrested for plotting a Columbine-style mass murder at their school. The 7th graders planned to knock out North Pole Middle School's power and telephone systems, then move systematically through the school, shooting and murdering the teachers, as well as students who picked on them. Absolutely horrible. Now their plan would have moved forward if it weren't for an anonymous student who overheard their plans and reported them to the authorities. Thank God. It turned out that at least 6 students had knowledge of the plot too, but had failed to inform anyone about the potential killing spree. Seems now that Christmas Town has an awful legend surrounding it, with many movies based on the town depicting it as something rotten and dangerous, maybe even haunted. Coming in at number 3, the Alaska Triangle. The Alaska Triangle, oftentimes called Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, is a place in the untouched wilderness of the frontier state where a large number of people have gone missing. The triangle connects Anchorage, Juneau, and Barrow, with the latter being a small town on the state's north coast, and has some of North America's most unforgiving wilderness. Now the triangle began attracting attention back in October 1972, when a small private plane carrying US House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and aide Russell Brown, and Bush pilot Don Johns vanished into thin air while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. Following the incident, more planes began to go down, as well as hikers going missing. Even Alaskan residents and tourists seemed to just vanish into thin air without any explanation. Since 1988, more than 16,000 people have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, with a missing person rate at more than twice the national average, which is absolutely terrifying. Why aren't we talking about this? Now, the disappearances are often blamed on everything from severe weather to aliens to swirling energy vortexes to an evil shape-shifting demon of Tlingit Indian lore called Kushtaka. Absolutely insane, but I respect these theories. Honestly, it's probably just the the weather, but you're cool. In at number 2, Saberwolf. Legend has it that Inuits described a wolf-like evil spirit of the Nahanni Valley that kills people by biting their heads off. In some reports, the animal had long saber-toothed fangs and weighed upwards of 600 pounds, all of which they would use to hunt and kill their prey. The so-called monster has been spotted in Alaska at least once by an American mechanic, who described it as a wolf on steroids, as well as the crew of an American TV show, Alaska Monsters, who claimed to have an encounter with the beast. However, there may be an historical answer for the beast. Way back when, there was an animal called the direwolf that lived up until the most recent ice age. Thanks to research, science tells us that this wolf averaged about 100 to 150 pounds and was first thought to be predecessors to dogs as well as the grey wolf. The direwolf had bone-crushing jaws. However, archaeological evidence suggests it was a scavenger as well as a hunter. However, whether they still exist today, no one has a definitive answer, so perhaps it is a direwolf folks have been spotting, or maybe it is a saber wolf. What do you guys think though? Could just be a wolf. And finally, in at number 1, the abandoned copper mine. This abandoned copper mining camp is a national historic landmark district that became a bustling mining camp filled with miners and their families. Now, in 1925, a geologist predicted that the area would soon be mined out, and he was correct, because by 1938 Kennecott was a ghost town, and as of today is a popular tourist attraction. Now, more interesting still, in the Kennecott mines, it was not gold that folks were digging for, but instead copper. After copper was discovered in 1900 in the area, a group of wealthy investors formed the Kennecott Copper Corporation to mine the incredibly rich copper before, of course, it was abandoned along with the railroad, which was eventually abandoned due to the cost of constantly changing its position across a nearby glacier, and the mining camp in turn became a ghost town. A very haunted ghost town at that. According to reports, the spectral phenomena in the area, which included tombstones appearing and then vanishing along hiking trails, sounds of crying children, and poltergeist activity, was enough to drive away state government workers who were trying to redevelop the area into government housing projects during the 1990s. Yikes. If you want to venture into the supernatural realm, you can, with the abandoned mine offering tours for those brave souls. In at 5, Haldria, also known as Haldr. These are seductive forest creatures found in Scandinavian folklore. Haldria derives from a root meaning covered or secret and is often depicted as just one individual. However, through folklore it is changed to an entire Haldr race, and not just one single entity. Haldr is described as being a troll-like woman living in the woods and is known to be fair and beautiful, but wild, and is known to have long hair which she hides behind her back upon meeting a human. This legend goes that Adam and Eve had a handful of children, and one day when Eve was giving her children a bath, God came to visit her. However, Eve had not yet bathed all her children, so she hid the ones that were dirty. God asked her, "Are there not more children?" Eve said no. So God responded, "Then let all that is hidden remain hidden." And thus the ones hidden became the underderiski. Excuse my pronunciation, please. Which means the ones living underground. The hidden children became lost souls under the surface of the earth, calling for someone to be with them, usually human passerbys. Haldria was one of these children, yet somehow managed to remain on the surface of the earth. Be warned, she is neither good nor evil and cannot be trusted. Coming in at 4, Jotni, also known as Jotun or Jotnar. This legend is described as being a type of entity contrasted with gods and other figures such as dwarfs and elves. In Norse mythology, Jotni appears as a giant being, often ugly and lumpy, with many of them in possession of great knowledge. Oftentimes the Jotni is described as riding on a wolf with vipers as reins, and is believed to be depicted in this 10th century picture stone from the Hunnestad monument. As I previously stated, most Jotni possess great wisdom. For example, Vavtrudni, I don't know how to pronounce it, who was clad with the very same knowledge as Odin. Legend goes that the Jotni are Thor's most dangerous opponent, and is a major motif in Norse mythology, with the Jotni residing in the Great Mountain area of southern Norway. Now, throughout history, the folklore has become blurred, with some stories blending Jotni and trolls together into one, but that is simply not the case, with these two legends having very separate histories throughout folklore. And that's the tea. Coming in at 3, Fossagrimmen, simply known as Grim. This is a water spirit, or troll in Scandinavian folklore. This water spirit plays the fiddle and is described as being exceptionally talented with the sounds of forest, wind and water playing over his fiddle strings. He is a young, handsome man who sits naked under waterfalls. What's not to love? Playing mostly the music of nature. Grim is said to be willing to teach his fiddle skills in exchange for a food offering made on a Thursday evening, and in secrecy. The offerings he accepts is a white goat thrown with head turned away into a waterfall that flows northward, smoked mutton stolen from the neighbour's storage 4 Thursdays in a row. However, if there is not enough meat on the bone, he will only teach those seeking the skill how to tune the fiddle. What a dick. However, if the offering is satisfactory, he will take the student's right hand and draw the fingers along the strings until they all bleed. But after that time, the student will be able to play so well that, I quote, "the trees shall dance and torrents in their fall stand still." It is rumoured that Torgeir Orgensen, better known as Millegutten, was a famous fiddle player from Telemark, Norway, who was so good at the fiddle that he was believed to have sold his soul in exchange for Grimm's skills. Coming in at 2, Nokken. Nokken is the Norwegian name for a specific type of water spirit, also known as the Knack or the Nika. The Nokken are supposedly able to shapeshift, but are more commonly known as male water spirits who lure women and children to their deaths, usually using their enchanted violin. This most commonly occurs at Christmas or on Midsummer's Eve, with the Nokken targeting pregnant women or children that had yet to be baptized. Now, it's not easy to describe the appearance of the Nokken due to its tendency to shapeshift. However, reports have stated that he is a rather elegant man, oftentimes lurking inside the waterfall. Seems to be where all the hot men are lurking these days. However, sometimes he has been depicted as a brook horse. Be warned, the Nokken will become unhappy if he does not have access to water, with tales emerging of one spirit who went to live with a human after they had fallen in love, but was unable to stay due to their deep yearning to be by the water. So if you ever find yourself lured in by the Nokken, just drain that waterfall and run away. Easy enough, right? However, don't fret too much, with most crediting this legend as a manifestation of the dangers associated with water. And finally, coming in at number 1, trolls. I mean, of course, trolls are the primary legend in all of Scandinavian mythology and folklore. Old Norse history describes trolls as beings that dwell in isolated rocks, mountains or caves and lives together in small family units that are rarely useful to human beings. Now, trolls are said to be inspired by the cruel giants who were the primary enemies of the gods who lived in the mountains of Utgard. They are said to have human-like appearance, but they are incredibly big and ugly. No shame, just facts. Now, like all legends, it varies from source to source, with some trolls being dim-witted, some have no particular grotesque characteristics, to others being dangerous to human beings. Now, although some are described as being man-eaters and as turning to stone upon contact with the sun, trolls are also attested as being solitary beings living far away from civilization. Upon the arrival of Christianity around the 1300s, the stories began to change, with stories emerging of the trolls being able to smell the blood of a Christian man, with them basically representing anything of the old times, which the new religion condemned.